Hey everyone, it's Holmes from Home Storybooks, and today I'm here to talk to you about non-fiction books that deal with vegetarianism. This is not to convert you or anyone at all. This is purely if you're curious about vegetarianism or if you want to read some non-fiction. I have no right to pass judgment on what anyone eats at any time. I just want to celebrate food and books. I wanted to add that if you're First Nations or Inuit, I fully support and understand the need to hunt, especially in places like the Northwest Territories of Canada, where permafrost, as in permanent frost, makes it very hard for the ground to thaw to grow food, and food security is a huge issue there. Food is always really expensive, and so if you're Indigenous and you hunt, I applaud you, and it's hard work, and you do not need my permission to engage in cultural practices you've kept up for 60,000 years. Alright, let's get on with the book, shall we? Starting off strong, I have Eating Animals by Jonathan Safran Foer. This book is about the author's decision around food, what to feed his family, why we eat the way we do, the effects of factory farming, and is interspersed with personal narrative. So I think that's why Foer's writing stuck with me so much and was so accessible, particularly in the beginning of the book. I think it's an excellent book to start with if you want to read more non-fiction because of the interspersed headings and reasonably sized chapters. I did, however, find it a little repetitive at times and certainly felt his bias in others. While I never really disagreed with his bias, sometimes I felt its presence was unwanted, as though he were trying to convince me of a point I already agreed to. I didn't particularly enjoy the chapters on Thanksgiving, and I wish he'd explored the topic of eating and our relationship with food more, not just factory farming. The aim of this book is not to shame you or curse you for your ignorance, which is greatly appreciated because I find that activists can often be militant in their causes and ignore other contexts in a person's life. Foer is a writer, and so he writes. He writes a book filled with searing truths, littered with little sentimentalities that I often find myself guilty of. He asks important questions that are worth thinking about and asks them in a really thoughtful way. I really enjoyed this book, and it, in fact, spurred me on to find more vegetarian non-fiction, which is how I came across The Vegetarian's Guide to Eating Meat, A Young Woman's Search for Ethical Food by Marissa Landrigan. This is a book about Landrigan's activism, her vegetarianism, and her eventual realization that even meat-free food is not always ethical. She discusses the impacts corporations have on vegetarian processed or packaged food, the huge migrant population who picks fruits and vegetables under terrible conditions, and how, for some people, abstaining from meat is not an option at all. Okay, I feel like I would have enjoyed this book a lot more if my expectations had been different going into it, so I'm going to adjust those expectations for you right now so you might enjoy it more. I went into this memoir thinking it would be a little like Jonathan Safran Foer's, lots of journalism with dips into personal narratives, but it really is a memoir. I got to read all about her boyfriends, her struggles with her family, everything. It almost felt like a performance. It felt so edited, like when you look back on your old Facebook statuses and they're not embarrassing per se, but you know you were trying to be something you weren't, and so now it's hard to connect to that person again. Landrigan starts out this book as a militant vegetarian, a label and set of values she gradually divests herself from once she realizes that the problems that exist in the meat-eating industry are not dissimilar from the vegetarian and even organic food industry. I just didn't understand her constant, mild isolation. It was like a miasma that infected all of her work. And anytime she talked about her family, she went on and on about how different she was from them, and I was just like, bruh, this is weird. She regularly acknowledges her privilege, and yet in one chapter, Corn-Fed, discusses romantically wandering into someone's cornfield to look around as if it were no big deal. As if anyone, regardless of the color of their skin, would feel comfortable hopping into a stranger's cornfield to look around. I'm not sure if this is what actually happened. In reality, she probably asked to see someone's cornfield and didn't want to include that information in the text because of its loss of rhythm, but I don't know, it just made me feel weird. All that aside, Strawberry Fields was an excellent chapter and totally what I was looking for in this book. I feel like a lot of her chapters would work better as articles in a newspaper rather than in a book. I found it readable until I came upon lines like, "I was the problem," which reminded me that she had this obsession with loneliness and isolation. The sources she used tend to be more interesting than her writing, and when she'd quickly refer to something, I'd want her to go back and elaborate on that story rather than her own. At times, this didn't feel like a memoir but a diary, and diaries have their time and place. I've used them before and loved using them, but there's a difference between a memoir and a diary. I loved the chapter Elk Country where Marissa moves to Montana and meets a First Nations co-worker named Maggie, who says she's unsure she can be friends with a vegetarian because she first learned to skin an elk at 13. Marissa often referred back to this colleague and herself, how close-minded she herself had been. So I was looking forward to Elk Country Part 2, where Marissa goes back to Montana to hunt an elk with an ethical hunter. And then Marissa says, I felt myself edging closer to understand what hunting meant to Maggie. Excuse me? There are so many things wrong with this statement. Firstly, Maggie's family has been doing this for tens of thousands of years. Secondly, the author already knew this because she then goes on to explain that many Native American tribes are called buffalo tribes because of their close connection to the animal and to the land. But hunting an elk once with an ethical hunter does not mean you come closer to understanding tens of thousands of years of cultural history and practice. I understand this probably wasn't what Landrigan meant at all, but there was just something off about it that I couldn't place. This white centering where Marissa goes to live a part of Maggie's experience while not actually being First Nations. Anyway, I feel like I've dragged this book long enough, so I want to say that it was readable, but I did struggle with so many aspects of it. I enjoyed the chapters Elk Country, Strawberry Fields, Chickpeas for Breakfast, Precocious Squash, and From Scratch. I wanted to like this book so much more than I did, and I'm disappointed that I didn't, but I hope now that I've given you a better idea of what this book is about, you'll enjoy it more than I did. On to my favorite part of this video, recipe books. These last two books I'll be recommending today are Thug Kitchen cookbooks, specifically Thug Kitchen Eat Like You Give a Fuck and Thug Kitchen 101 Fast as Fuck. Looking at the Thug Kitchen cookbook, you can see how many times I've tabbed it. The blue flags are things that I like and eat fairly regularly. Pink ones are ones I want to try, and this green one is the tofu marinades page, which I was using at one point 3 to 4 times a week. While the excessively edgy swearing can sometimes be funny or off-putting, if you like Tex-Mex comfort food, this is for you. These recipes are well-balanced, delicious, and will totally fill you up. I've had entire dinner parties made through these recipes where everything was vegetarian or vegan, and I don't remember anyone complaining about a lack of meat or even asking if there was meat in anything. Some of these recipes I can remember off the top of my head are grilled peach salsa burritos, pineapple guacamole, apple baked beans, blueberry and lavender scones, crunchy peanut slaw, watermelon hibiscus coolers, and on it goes. These recipes tend to run a little on the sour/acidic side, and their oven temperatures tend to be a little hot for my oven. But I use this cookbook so regularly that for last Christmas, I asked for this cookbook. Thug Kitchen 101 Fast as Fuck focuses on comfort food, so you get lots of pasta, lots of soups, curries, pilafs, and more. This one has more Asian food with laksas, curries, and dan dan noodles. I've only just dipped into this recipe book, but their red curry noodle soup is already one of my favorites. I can't wait to cook more out of it, and now I'm just really hungry. Lastly, I want to read Colin Spencer's Heretic's Feast, A History of Vegetarianism. Spencer looks at the history of vegetarianism through prehistoric times, its social implications, its philosophical reasons, its religious reasons, and more. Spencer discusses the historical figures who've taken up vegetarianism, everyone from Pythagoras, Ovid, Leonardo da Vinci, and Hitler. I borrowed it from the library once, and it was something like 500 pages. It was a behemoth, but so well researched, and so I want to get stuck into it again. I'd also love to read The Omnivore's Dilemma by Michael Pollan, which is mentioned in both Eating Animals and A Vegetarian's Guide to Eating Meat. It's all about where food comes from in America, its processes, its surprising political size, and how we end up with our food on our plate. I've heard mixed things, but I love listening to Michael Pollan on the Netflix series Cooked, so I wanted to check this out. That's it, that's all for this video. Please keep the comments courteous and don't attack people for their dietary choices. Do you have any other recommendations for me? I'd love books about food and I'd love some cookbook recommendations, vegetarian or otherwise. Let's talk nicely down in the comments below. Bye everyone!